Blessings, distinguished listeners. Today we will embark on a journey through biblical history and its meaning in Abrahamic religions. Our video today will focus on the life and works of a fundamental character, Ishmael. Ishmael, a name that resonates in the pages of the Bible and in Islamic traditions, represents an intriguing figure in religious narrative. In the next few minutes, we will explore the details of Ishmael's life, the promises God made regarding him, and who the descendants who carry his legacy are today. Without further ado, let us begin our exploratory journey into the life and legacy of Ishmael. Let's start. Ishmael is known as the son of Abraham and Hagar, the Egyptian. His birth is a fundamental starting point in his story, and to understand this event, it is essential to go back a little in time. Abraham and his wife Sarah had long wanted to have a child, but Sarah was barren. In search of a solution, Sarah allowed Abraham to have a child with his servant Hagar. This marked the beginning of a complex story full of nuances. Ishmael was born as a result of this union between Abraham and Hagar. His name Ishmael has a deep meaning in Hebrew, which is God hears. This name reflects the special circumstance of his birth in which God heard Hagar's cry in the wilderness. However, Ishmael's birth also created tensions and rivalries within Abraham's family. The relationship between Sarah and Hagar became strained due to Hagar's motherhood, triggering a series of significant events in Ishmael's story. One of the highlights in Ishmael's life is the divine promise of great descendants. This promise is found in the book of Genesis in chapter 16, verse 10 onwards. Let's read what the biblical text says. The angel added, "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery." In these verses, we see that an angel of the Lord appears to Hagar in the desert and gives her a promise of blessing regarding Ishmael. In Genesis chapter 17, verse 20, it says, "And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation." In this verse, we see that God also gives the patriarch Abraham a promise of blessing regarding his son Ishmael. God had established a promise of blessing between Abraham and Sarah, but Sarah and Abraham doubted that promise since Sarah was barren. For this reason, she gave Hagar to Abraham so that he could sleep with her and have a son. Although Abraham had a son with Hagar, but that was not a promise that God had promised to Abraham. In chapter 17 of Genesis, we see that God tells Abraham that he will have a son with Sarah, and with him he will sign his eternal covenant. When God says these words to Abraham, Ishmael was already a 13-year-old teenager. Surely Abraham's concern was, what will become of Ishmael? God, knowing Abraham's heart, also makes a promise of blessing for Ishmael and tells him that 12 princes will come from Ishmael. However, the promise of the covenant that God had made with Abraham, where he told him, "In your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed," this was fulfilled with Isaac, since from that descendant came our Lord Jesus Christ. In chapter 21 of Genesis, we see the birth of Isaac. The biblical story tells that after Isaac was weaned, Ishmael mocked him. Sarah came to see this problem. For this reason, Abraham decided to throw Hagar out with Ishmael. The biblical story tells that Hagar and Ishmael wandered in the desert of Berzema. The drinking water was gone. Ishmael, being in agony, sat under a bush and lifted up his voice and wept. God heard the voice of Ishmael, so the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid, God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." The biblical story tells that God opened Hagar's eyes and she saw a fountain of water. She filled the skin with water and gave Ishmael a drink, and after this Ishmael grew and became strong in the desert of Paran, south of Canaan. He was a bow shooter and God was with him. Ishmael married an Egyptian, founded Ishmaelia, and fathered 12 princes, just as God had promised Abraham. The names of the 12 sons of Ishmael are as follows: Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadar, Tema, Jetur, Naphiz, and Kedema. We find this in Genesis chapter 25, verse 12 onwards. Ishmael also had a daughter who became the wife of Esau, son of Isaac. According to the biblical account, the sons of Ishmael occupied eastern Egypt in the direction of Syria. There they lived in open opposition to all their relatives. Their home was the desert of northern Arabia and eastern Syria. In Genesis chapter 25, verse 7 onwards, we see that Ishmael, together with his brother Isaac, buried his father Abraham. Finally, Ishmael died in Arabia at the age of 137. His descendants are the Ismailis, and they settled between the border of Egypt and the Persian Gulf. In Genesis chapter 37, verse 25, we see that the Ishmaelites led the caravans that brought the products of Arabia to Egypt and Mesopotamia. Over time, its name became almost synonymous with desert towns. According to the biblical account, Joseph was sold by his brothers to the Ishmaelites, and they took him to Egypt. After Abraham's wife Sarah died, Abraham married a woman named Keturah, and with her he had 6 sons, whose names were Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shwach. We find this in Genesis chapter 25. According to historians, it is likely that there were intermarriages between the Ishmaelites and the descendants of Abraham and Keturah, whose descendants occupied some parts of Arabia, since Ishmael and Midian were half-brothers. Any mixed marriage of their respective descendants, a mixture of blood, customs, traits, and occupations, could have given rise to interchangeable use of the expressions Ismaili and Midianite. In general terms, Arabs and Muslims have a rejection and distrust of Jews and vice versa. The oldest root of bitterness between Isaac and Ishmael does not explain all the current hostility between Jews and Arabs. In fact, for thousands of years in the history of the Middle East, Jews and Arabs lived in relative peace and indifference toward each other. The primary cause of hostility has a more recent origin. In 1948, after World War II, the United Nations gave a portion of the land of Israel to the Jews. The land at that time was inhabited, first, by the Arabs, the Palestinians. The majority of Arabs were against the nation of Israel occupying that land, so in less than 24 hours after Israel was formed as a nation, the Arab nations united and attacked Israel in an attempt to remove them from that land. But in the end, they were defeated by Israel. Since then, there has been great hostility between Israel and its Arab neighbors. If we look on the map, Israel occupies a small strip of land and is surrounded by several much larger Arab nations such as Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Egypt. Now, the religion of Islam, to which a majority of Arabs belong, has made this hostility even deeper. The Quran contains some contradictory instructions for Muslims regarding Jews. At one point, Muslims are instructed to treat Jews as brothers, and at another, Muslims are ordered to attack Jews who refuse to convert to Islam. The Quran also introduces a conflict as to who is the true son of Abraham's promise. The Hebrew scriptures say he was Isaac, but the Quran says he was Ishmael. The Quran also says that it was Ishmael whom Abraham almost sacrificed to God and not Isaac. This debate over who was the son of promise contributes to the current hostility. Islam is the predominant religion in most Arab countries. The figure of Ishmael, along with his father Abraham, has a prominent place in the religious history of Islam. The belief in Ishmael as a prophet and his role in the construction of the Kaaba in Mecca are key aspects of the Islamic faith. Muslim tradition says that in the place where the Temple of Jerusalem was located, their prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven, and it is for this reason that in the place where the Jewish temple was, today a Muslim mosque is built. That place is very special for both Jews and Muslims, and it is for this reason that the Jews cannot build their third temple, since if they demolish the Muslim mosque in Jerusalem, a war would break out between Arabs and Israelites. And so we come to the end of this video. My beloved brothers, I invite you to pray for these two nations and especially for Jerusalem. And this would be all from me, and without further ado, now I say goodbye, and it will be with me until the next video.